Hey guys, Jack Spirko here with another episode of Miyagi Mornings, and let me make sure the mic is synced. It is. Okay, so today we're going to talk about chickens, and I consider myself a chicken amateur. I really am. I'm much more a duck guy. Not to brag or anything, but I think there's probably very few people that can tell you things about ducks that I can't, other than maybe some specific things to extreme northern climates where I've never raised livestock at all in. Chickens I've played with. I once had a flock of almost 70 birds, so I think I'm pretty qualified to answer this question. Just know that your mileage may vary, and I am not guaranteeing anything that I tell you here, and I'm giving kind of round estimated numbers based on the question. So the question, first of all, came from Miyagi, and if you go to Miyagi.com and friend me up, it might take a day or two, but I will accept your friend request. I accept 100% of people on Miyagi as friends because of the way it works. And if you turn out to be an asshat, I ban you. And otherwise, I just trust you first because, hey, I'm a public personality. I want you to hear what I'm saying anyway. But I have made a post and I have stickied it to the top of my profile on Miyagi. And it is specifically for suggesting topics and asking questions for Miyagi Mornings. And while I'm sure I'll come up with other topics and other inputs, it is the only official way to specifically ask for a question or topic on Miyagi Mornings from now on. That's a little incentive to get on Miyagi. And I plan on some of these alternative social media platforms to do some things exclusively there. I'm doing some exclusive stuff when it comes to video content on Odyssey. The only way you'll know is to get over there and check out my Odyssey profile. And I don't know what I'm going to do with Float yet, but I have some ideas coming down the pike. All right, so the basic question was about how roosters relate with hens and how you manage a flock with roosters. They included, I'm going from memory here, but do you put your roosters in your hen house with your hens at night? The answer to that one is yes, absolutely. Can two roosters even get along? Can you even have a flock with more than one rooster? And also about feed, like where do I get my non-GMO, non-corn, non-soy feed? What brand do I use, etc. So we're going to just do all of that because it's all pretty straightforward. My basic experience and the general consensus is your rooster to hen ratio to have multiple roosters in a flock needs to be somewhere between 7 and 10 hens to the rooster. And if you do that, in general, not guaranteed, in general, roosters will tend to get along and not overbreed your hens. I can tell you that ratio works perfectly with ducks. It's actually a bit low if you want to be reproducing ducks. Ducks are not monogamous at all, but they tend to kind of decide, like, this is my little group that I'm going to breed with that'll cooperate. And so I have 2 drakes and 18 ducks. And I can tell you right now, my fertility rate with my ducks is pretty low. With chickens, that would be almost a perfect ratio, not just for keeping the peace, but for keeping pretty high fertility as well. Running that ratio, I once just randomly threw 32 eggs in an incubator and hatched 31. I have never had that kind of hatch rate with ducks, no matter what I've done. So you will have plenty of fertility at that ratio, and it will probably, keyword probably, work. There is no guarantees with this. I also can describe the behavior of some of the roosters I've kept. The only word I can use for it is racist. In general, when cockerels come up together, right? So they were brooded together either by a hen or in the brooder, and they grew up together. As long as there's enough girls around, there may be some sparring and stuff, but mostly, especially with a decent ratio of hen to rooster, they tend to get along. One time when I first got into chickens, I got some straight run Egyptian Fayomis, and I got some red sex links that were supposed to all be cockerels. You're supposed to be able to tell them apart. I don't know if that failed, or maybe the rooster that got mixed in with the red sex links was a Rhode Island Red or something, but I ended up with 1 rooster. And I ended up with 6 Egyptian Fayomi cockerels and 2 pullets. If you're new to this, cockerel is a rooster, pullet is a young hen before she's laying eggs. So, what happened? They nearly killed him. He was a rooster I had around for a while. You can find some old videos of him. He ended up being like my best buddy and a pet. We called him Upgrade after the pimp in the movie Idiocracy, because he was a pimp daddy rooster once he grew up. But he disappeared for a couple of days, and I hadn't yet figured out that he was a rooster, but the Egyptian Fayomis did, and he actually somehow managed to get in the floor of the chicken coop. My wife came in and said she heard a chicken under the coop. I thought she's nuts, but I always also, like I said, yes, to learn to trust my wife. I went out there and I could hear him under there. He'd been under there a week in 100-degree heat. I had to pull half the floor up. I had to feed him. and give him water and lure him to where I could reach under and pull him out. And I realized at that point, I'm looking at a young rooster. As soon as he saw the Fayomis, he got really nervous, started growling, making noises, really, really upset because they outnumbered him 6-1. The next day I slaughtered those Egyptian Fayomis, and that rooster watched me do it, and he became my best friend. And that's why when I went away from chickens, I made sure he went to a good home because he was a great rooster. And I'll tell you another story about that rooster. Over time, we started to reproduce our birds, and several of his sons in a very large flock where there were a good rooster-to-hen ratio were allowed to remain, and they always got along. Occasionally he might give them a slap down, but they worked it out. Animals tend to work things out if we let them, as long as we keep the ratio up. So that worked out fine, and basically I culled those males based on the ones that spurred me in the coop. If you put a spur in the back of my leg, you hung from the oak tree about 5 minutes later, and I took the passive roosters. And I really advise you that's the easiest way forward if you're breeding your own birds and you want to know which roosters to select. Look for characteristics of taking care of the hens as they get older, etc. But one attacks you, and you've got multiples to pick from, you might be able to reform a rooster, but don't do it if you don't have to. Pick the ones that are naturally accepting of humans, and they do their job as a rooster, defending their hens and running their hens. Otherwise, I think that's about where you are. My bigger concern when it comes to roosters and hens and having too many roosters than them fighting, because sooner or later they'll work that out, and one will either get his ass beat and conform, or one will get beat down to where you need to process it, and it'll work itself out, is the hens. When roosters start overbreeding hens, you end up with hens that look like they have freaking mange and feathers missing and stuff like that. And there's two tactics to take if that begins to happen in your flock. One is simply remove the hen for a while. Take her and a couple of her friends and put them somewhere the roosters can't get to them. The problem with that is generally as soon as you reintroduce those birds to the flock, that rooster goes kind of ape on them. And again, by keeping enough hens around, you get less of the selective kind of one-off, I'm going to breed this one over and over again. What's worked really well for me is those little chicken saddles that protect the chicken's back. You put them around their wings. I haven't had to do that in a long time, but when I had birds that were being treated like that, I did that and it worked. You have to do something because not only will the behavior from the rooster continue, but those bloody spots and bare spots on those hens, the other hens will start picking at it. Chickens use their beak the way you use, what is that? And they use their beak, they have no fingers, they have no hands. So they get a little bit of meat. And no matter what the marketing tells you, chickens are carnivorous, man. Well, they're omnivorous, but they like meat. You want to see chickens go crazy, give them some meat. They go nuts. They will strip a bone to where the dog walks up to it, looks at it and goes, well, there's nothing there for me anymore. So it's not good. It leads to freaking zombie chicken behavior. So you've got to cover it and you've got to protect that bird. If you do that, most of the time you'll be all right. And there are times when you just say, like this bird, whether it's a cockerel that's too aggressive or whether it's a hen that's just getting beat up, it's time to cull that bird out, put her in the stew pot, put him in the stew pot, and move on. And I mean, that's just part. If you're not going to do that, you need to find someone who will, that will take birds that need to be culled. Otherwise, you're going to have expensive pets if you keep chickens too long once they stop laying or once they become problems. It's just the fundamental reality to it. All right, so the last part, what brand of feed do I use? I use Texas Naturals. It has no corn and no soy and no GMO. It primarily gets its protein from peanut meal and fish meal, and the birds love it. It's also getting harder and harder to source because my main source stopped carrying it. It was a place called Russell Feeds. I'm now going to have to drive 45 minutes out west to get that feed, and this tells you how much I like it. I'll do it. I'll go, and the thing is, I don't have 150 ducks anymore. I got like 20 something. And what that means is that I can go out there, pick up 10 bags of feed, and I'm good for months. So that's why I'm willing to still do it. Let's talk about the various criteria there that was rattled off. I market no corn, no soy, no GMO because I have it and because my customers like hearing it. I don't want GMO, period, the end, infinity. I will not feed my birds a GMO feed unless they're going to die if I don't. It's the only thing I can get. Then I would go ahead and do it. The herbicide residue in that is my problem. It's not so much, well, it's genetically modified. That's not my problem. My problem is why they genetically modify it. They genetically modify it, then they spray it with glyphosate, aka Roundup, and other herbicides, and then you feed it to your animal and then you eat the product. No freaking way. I'm not doing all this work to go ahead and eat herbicide. That's bullshit, and I won't do it. And there's not enough providers out there. No soy. I will not, again, unless my birds are at the edge of dying from not getting fed, put soy into an animal I harvest an egg from. It should be illegal. It's definitely immoral. Soy has phytoestrogens in it. An egg is an ovum. What do you think happens when you feed a female animal a phytoestrogen and harvest the ovum? You're looking at a phytoestrogen bomb. It's worse than a soy latte. That's how I feel. And I'll tell you what, my customers have proven that. Because we've had customers, organic, duck eggs, chicken eggs, you name it, everything. They can't eat them. They have bad reactions to them. They come here, they say, well, can I get a half dozen? Here, we'll just give you a half dozen. They call you back up a couple days later. Sometimes they sound like they're damn near in tears. I can eat these. I don't get sick. And the only thing because I don't do organic, because I can't find an organic feed that also does those things. It's more important to me that I have no GMO, which all organic would, but no soy. Soy is the devil. Again, I'll feed it to my birds if I have to, but this is why I'm working harder and harder to produce feed for my birds on my land that's high in protein, so I never end up having to make that hard choice. Corn. If it's not GMO, I don't have a problem with corn. Not for me. Humans should not be eating corn. You do not have a crop. Corn in its natural state is not that sweet corn. It's a very hard-shelled thing. A chicken has a crop. Birds have a crop. They eat gravel. They're designed to eat things like grains and seeds. That's what they're supposed to. You have a giant liver. You're made to eat animal products. I'm sorry if you don't like that. It's true. That's why you have a friggin' liver that's this friggin' big and no crop. So chickens eating corn, I don't have a problem with. It's very low in protein, especially modern corns, so it can't make up the staple of a diet. But if I had to switch to a feed that had some corn in it, but it wasn't GMO, and it still had the right balance and sufficient protein in the 20 percentile range, I'd be okay with it. I will occasionally feed my birds like an organic scratch that includes, wheat and barley and cracked corn. Texas Naturals makes that as well. I have not found another brand of feed that meets my criteria and my birds will eat. A friend of mine from out west Texas brought me some feed one time, and it sounded fantastic on the composition, and my birds let it rot. They wouldn't eat it. Now, ducks, unlike chickens, get really attached to something. They don't like change. They're like Wayne and Garth, we fear change. So if I had not fed them, they probably would have switched over. So I hope I don't end up in that situation as well. It costs me twice as much to feed my birds this way as it does to feed them Purina crap from the feed store right out the corner here that I could go pick up in the time I've done this video, I could already went down there, picked up 10 bags and been back. And I won't do it. That tells you how I feel about it. If I ever have to, if the supply line of my preferred type of feed dries up, my hope is by that point, my birds are getting around 70 to 80% of their diet from the land so that it's less of an effect on them. And that would be my last bit of advice. So there you go. I know I kind of blended ducks back into it, but it's what I know. And I would approach feeding my chickens the same way. I really encourage you to start looking into things that you can grow in lots of volume that are high in protein, especially those of you that are far enough south to get a long growing season. Just a little water tank and some water hyacinth. I'm going to be doing a lot with that this year. Dried water hyacinth leaf that's 35% protein. It's equivalent to most soy that's being made today. With that, you can do an awful lot to mitigate your reliance, which you should be doing anyway, but that way you can more justify these premium feeds. Again, the company that used to carry it is Russell Feeds. If you're anywhere in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's a bunch of locations. Call them up, tell them you want it back. All right, take care, guys. I will catch you with another episode tomorrow.